Chapter 4, Part 2. Fishing a handkerchief from a back pocket, Freckles tenderly wiped Wessner's eyes and nose. "Come, Freddie, me child," he admonished Wessner. "It's time little boys were getting home. I've me work to do, and I can't be entertaining you any more today. Come back tomorrow if you ain't through yet, and we'll repeat the performance. Don't be staring at me so wild-like. I would eat you, but I can't afford it. Me earnings, being honest, come slow, and I've no money to be squandering on the pailful of dyspeptic's delight it would take me to be taking you to work out of me innards." Again an awful wrenching seized McLean. Freckles stepped back as Wessner, tottering and reeling as a thoroughly drunken man, came toward the path, appearing indeed as if wild cats had attacked him. The cudgel spun high in the air, and catching it with an expertness acquired by long practice on the line, the boy twirled it a second, shook back his thick hair bontily, and stepping into the trail followed Wessner. Because Freckles was Irish, it was impossible to do it silently, and presently his clear tenor rang out, though there were bad catches where he was hard pressed for breath. "It was the Dutch, it was the Dutch. Do you think it was the Irish hollered help? Not much. It was the Dutch, it was the Dutch." Wessner turned and mumbled, "What you following me for? What are you going to do with me?" Freckles called the Limberlost to witness. "How's that for the ingratitude of a beast? And me troubling myself to show him off me territory with the honors of war." Then he changed his tone completely and added, "Belike it's this, Freddy. You see, the boss might come riding down the trail any minute, and the little mare's so wheedlesome that if she'd come on to you in your present state all of a sudden, she'd stop that short, she'd send Mr. McLean out over the ears of her. No disparagement intended to the sense of the mare," he added hastily. Wessner belched a fearful oath, and Freckles laughed merrily. "That's a sample of the thanks a generous acts always be gettin'," he continued. "Here's me neglectin' me work to escort you out proper, and you saying such awful words. Freddy," he demanded sternly, "do you want me to soap out your mouth? You don't seem to be realizing it, but if you was to buck into Mr. McLean in your present state, without me there to explain matters, the chance is he'd cut the liver out of you, and I shouldn't think you'd be wanting such a fine gentleman as him to see that it's white." Wessner grew ghastly under this grime, and broke into a staggering run. "And now will you be looking at the manners of him?" questioned Freckles plaintively. "Going without even a thank you, right in the face of all the pains I've taken to make it interesting for him." Freckles twirled the baton and stood as a soldier at attention until Wessner left the clearing. But it was the last scene of that performance. When the boy turned, there were signs of illness on his face, and his legs wavered beneath his weight. He staggered to the case, and opening it, he took out a piece of cloth. He dipped it into the water, and sitting on a bench, he wiped the blood and grime from his face, while his breath sucked between his clenched teeth. He was shivering with pain and excitement in spite of himself. He unbuttoned the band of his right sleeve, and turning it back, exposed the blue-lined, calloused whiteness of his maimed arm, now vividly streaked with contusions, while in a series of circular dots the blood oozed slowly. Here Wessner had succeeded in setting his teeth. When Freckles saw what it was, he forgave himself the kick in the pit of Wessner's stomach and cursed fervently and deep. "Freckles! Freckles!" said McLean's voice. Freckles snatched down his sleeve and arose to his feet. "Excuse me, sir," he said. "You'll surely be believing I thought myself alone." McLean pushed him carefully to the seat, and bending over him, opened a pocket case that he carried as constantly as his revolver and watch, for cuts and bruises were of daily occurrence among the game. Taking the hurt arm, he turned back the sleeve and bathed and bound the wounds. He examined Freckles' head and body and convinced himself that there was no permanent injury, although the cruelty of the punishment the boy had borne set the boss shuddering. Then he closed the case, shoved it into his pocket, and sat beside Freckles. All the indescribable beauty of the place was strong around him, but he saw only the bruised face of the suffering boy, who had hedged for the information he wanted as a diplomat, argued as a judge, fought as a sheik, and triumphed as a devil. When the pain lessened and breath relieved Freckles' pounding heart, he watched the boss covertly. How had McLean gotten here, and how long had he been there? Freckles did not dare ask. At last he arose and, going to the case, took out his revolver and the wire-mending apparatus and locked the door. Then he turned to McLean. "Have you any orders, sir?" he asked. "Yes," said McLean, "I have, and you are to follow them to the letter. Turn over that apparatus to me and go straight home. Soak yourself in the hottest bath your skin will bear, and go to bed at once. Now hurry." "Mr. McLean," said Freckles, "it's sorry I am to be telling you, but the afternoon's walking of the line ain't done. You see, I was just for getting to me feet to start, and I was on good time when up comes a gentleman, and we got into a little heated argument. It's either settled or it's just begun, but between us, I'm that late I haven't started for the afternoon yet. I must be going at once, for there's a tree I must find before the day's over." "You plucky little idiot," growled McLean. "You can't walk the line. I doubt if you can get to Duncan's. Don't you know when you're done up? You go to bed. I'll finish your work." "Never," protested Freckles. "I was just a little done up for the prison a minute ago. I'm all right now. Riding boots are way too low. The day's hot and the walk's a good 7 miles, sir. Never." As he reached for the outfit, he pitched forward on his eyes closed. McLean stretched him on the moss and applied restoratives. When Freckles returned to consciousness, McLean ran to the cabin to tell Mrs. Duncan to have a hot bath ready and to bring Nellie. That worthy woman promptly filled the wash boiler and set a roaring fire under it. She pushed the horse trough from its base and rolled it to the kitchen. By the time McLean came again, leading Nellie and holding Freckles on her back, Mrs. Duncan was ready for business. She and the boss laid Freckles in the trough and poured on hot water until he squirmed. They soaked, rubbed, and scoured him. Then they turned off the hot water and closed his pores with cold. Lastly, they stretched him on the floor and chafed, rubbed, and kneaded him until he cried out for mercy. As they rolled him into bed, his eyes dropped shut, but a little later they flared open. "Mr. McLean," he cried. "The tree! Oh, do be looking after the tree!" McLean bent over him. "Which tree, Freckles?" "I don't know exact, sir, but it's on the east line, and the wire is fastened to it. He bragged that you nailed it yourself, sir. You'll know it by the bark having been laid open to the grain somewhere now low down, and it was $500 he offered me to be selling you out, sir." Freckles' head rolled over and his eyes dropped shut. McLean towered over him. His bright hair waved on the pillow. His face was swollen and purple with bruises. His left arm, with a hand battered almost out of shape, stretched beside him, and the right, with no hand at all, lay across a chest that was a mass of purple welts. McLean's mind traveled back to that night, almost a year before, when he had engaged Freckles, a stranger. McLean bent, covering the hurt arm with one hand and laying the other with a caress on the boy's forehead. Freckles stirred at his touch and whispered, as softly as the swallows under the eaves, "If you're coming this way tomorrow, be pleased to step over, and we'll repeat the chorus softly." "Bless the gritty devil," growled McLean. Then he went out and told Mrs. Duncan to keep close watch on Freckles and send Duncan to him at the swamp the minute he came home. Following the trail to the line and back to the scene of the fight, the boss entered Freckles' study softly, as if his spirit, sleeping there, might be aroused, and gazed around with astonished eyes. How had the boy conceived it? What a picture he had wrought with living colors! He had the heart of a painter. He had the soul of a poet. The boss stepped carefully over the velvet carpet and touched the walls of crisp verdure with gentle fingers. He stood long beside the flower bed and gazed at the banked wall of bright bloom, as if he doubted its reality. Where had Freckles ever found, and how had he transplanted such ferns? As McLean turned from them, he stopped suddenly. He had reached the door of the cathedral. That which Freckles had attempted would have been patent to anyone. What had been in the heart of the shy, silent boy when he had found that long, dim stretch of forest, decorated its entrance, cleared and smoothed its aisle, and carpeted its altar? What various work of God was in these mighty living pillars in the arched dome of green? How similar to stained cathedral windows were the long openings between the trees, filled with rifts of blue, rays of gold, and the shifting emerald of leaves? Where could be found mosaics to match this aisle paved with living color and glowing lights? Was Freckles a devout Christian, and did he worship here? Or was he an untaught heathen, and down this vista of entrancing loveliness did Pan come piping, and dryads, nymphs, and fairies dance for him? Who can fathom the heart of a boy? McLean had been thinking of Freckles as a creature of unswerving honesty, courage, and faithfulness. Here was evidence of a heart aching for beauty, art, companionship, worship. It was writ large all over the floor, walls, and furnishing of that little Limberlost clearing. When Duncan came, McLean told him the story of the fight, and they laughed until they cried. Then they started around the line in search of the tree. Said Duncan, "Now the boy is in for sore trouble." "I hope not," answered McLean. "You never in all your life saw a cur whipped so completely. He won't come back for the repetition of the chorus. We surely can find the tree. If we can't, Freckles can. I will bring enough of the gang to take it out at once. That will ensure peace for a time, at least, and I am hoping that a month more the whole gang can be moved here. It soon will be fall, and then, if he will go, I intend to send Freckles to my mother to be educated. With his quickness of mind and body and a few years' good help, he can do anything. Why, Duncan, I'd give $100 bill if you could have been here and seen for yourself." "Yes, and I'd have done murder," muttered the big teamster. "I hope, sir, you'll make good your plans for Freckles, though. I'd as soon see only born child of my own taken from your home. We love the lad, me and Sarah." Locating the tree was easy, because it was so well identified. When the rumble of the big lumber wagons passing the cabin on the way to the swamp awakened Freckles next morning, he sprang up and was soon following them. He was sore and stiff, that every movement was torture at first, but he grew easier, and shortly did not suffer so much. McLean scolded him for coming yet, and his heart triumphed over every new evidence of fineness in the boy. The tree was a giant maple, and so precious that they almost dug it out by the roots. When it was down, cut in lengths, and loaded, there was yet an empty wagon. As they were gathering up their tools to go, Duncan said, "There's a big hollow tree somewhere mighty close here that I've been wanting for a watering trough for my stock. The one I have is so small. The Portland Company cut this for elm butts last year, and it's 6 feet diameter and hollow for 40 feet. It was a buster. While the men are here, and there is an empty wagon, why mightn't I load it on up and take it to the barn as we pass?" McLean said he was very willing, and ordered the driver to break line and get the log, and detailed men with the loading apparatus to assist. He had told Freckles to ride on a section of the maple with him, but now the boy asked to enter the swamp with Duncan. "I don't see why you want me to go," said McLean. "I have no business to let you out today at all." "It's me chickens," whispered Freckles in distress. "You see, I was just after finding yesterday from my new book how they do be nesting in hollow trees, and there ain't too many in the swamp. There's just a chance they might be in that one." "Go ahead," said McLean. "That's a different story. If they happen to be there, why, tell Duncan he must give up the tree until they finished with it." Then he climbed on a wagon and was driven away. Freckles hurried into the swamp. He was some little distance behind, yet he could see the men. Before he had overtook them, they had turned from the west road and had entered the swamp on the east. They stopped at the trunk of a monstrous prostrate log. It had been cut close 3 feet from the ground, over 3/4 of the way through, and had fallen to the east, the body of the log still resting on the stump. The underbrush was almost impenetrable, but Duncan plunged in and with a crowbar began tapping along the trunk to decide how far it was hollow, so that they would know where to cut. As they awaited his decision, there came from the mouth of it, on wing, a large black bird that swept over their heads. Freckles danced wildly. "It's me chickens! Oh, it's me chickens!" he shouted. "Oh, Duncan, come quick! You found the nest of me precious chickens!" Duncan hurried to the mouth of the log, but Freckles was before him. He crashed through poison vines and underbrush regardless of any danger, and climbed on the stump. When Duncan came, he was shouting like a wild thing. "It's hatched!" he yelled. "Oh, me big chicken has hatched out me little chicken, and there's another egg. I can see it plain, and oh, the funny little white baby. Oh, Duncan, can you see me little white chicken?" Duncan could easily see it, and so could everyone else. Freckles crept into the log and tenderly carried the hissing, blinking little thing to the light in the leaf-lined hat. The men found it sufficiently wonderful to satisfy even Freckles, who had forgotten he was ever sore or stiff, and coddled over it with every blarneying term of endearment he knew. Duncan gathered his tools. "Deal's off, boys," he said cheerfully. "This log might not be touched until Freckles' chuckies have finished with it. We might as well gang. Better put it back, Freckles. It's just out and it may chill. You'll probably head toward the warren." Freckles crept into the log and carefully deposited the baby beside the egg. When he came back, he said, "I made a big mistake not to be bringing the egg out with the baby, but I was fearing to touch it. It's shaped like a hen's egg, and it's as big as a turkey's and the beautifulest blue, just splattered with big brown splotches like my book said precise. But you never saw such a sight as it made on the yellow of the rotten wood, beside that funny, leathery-faced little white baby." "Tell you what, Freckles," said one of the teamsters, "have you ever heard of this bird woman who goes all over the country with a camera and makes pictures? She made some on my brother Jim's place last summer, and Jim's so wild about them he quits plowing and goes after her about every nest he finds. He helps her all he can to get them, and then she gives him a picture. Jim's so proud of what he has, he keeps them in the Bible. He shows them to everybody that comes and brags about how he helped to take them. If you're smart, you'll send for her and she'll come out and make a picture just like life. If you help her, she will give you one. It would be uncommon pretty to keep after your birds are gone. I don't know what they are. I never seen their like before. They must be something rare. Any of you fellows ever see a bird like that hereabouts?" No one ever had. "Well," said the teamster, Failing to get this log lets me off till noon, and I'm going to town. I go right past her place. I have a big notion to stop and tell her. If she drives straight back in the swamp on the west road and turns east at this big sycamore, she can't miss finding the tree, even if Freckles ain't about to show her. Jim says her work is a credit to the state she lives in, and any man is a measly creature that isn't willing to help her all he can. My old daddy used to say that all there was to religion was doing to the other fellow what you'd want him to do to you. And if I was making a living taking bird pictures, seems to me I'd be mighty glad for a chance to take one like that. So I'll just stop and tell her. And by gummy, maybe she will give me a picture of the little white sucker for my trouble. Freckles touched his arm. Will she be rough with it? He asked. Government land? No, said the teamster. She's dead down on anybody that shoots a bird or tears up a nest. Why, she's half killing herself in all kinds of places and weather to teach people to love and protect the birds. She's that plumb careful of them that Jim's wife says she has Jim standing like a big fool, holding an umbrella over them when they are young, and tender until she gets a focus, whatever that is. Jim says there ain't a bird on this place that don't actually seem to be like having her around after she has wheedled them a few days, and the pictures she gets nobody would ever believe that didn't stand by and see them taken. Will you be sure to tell her to come? Asked Freckles. Duncan slept at home that night. He heard Freckles slipping out early the next morning, but he was too sleepy to wonder why, until he came to do his morning chores. When he found that none of his stock was at all thirsty, and saw the water trough brimming, he knew that the boy was trying to make up to him for the loss of the big trough that he had been so anxious to have. Bless his fool little hot heart, said Duncan, and him so sore it is tearing him to move for anything. No wonder he has us all loving him. Freckles was moving briskly, and his heart was so happy that he forgot all about the bruises. He hurried around the trail, and on his way down the east side he went to see the chickens. The mother bird was on the nest. He was afraid the other egg might be hatching, so he did not venture to disturb her. He made the round and reached his study early. He had his lunch along and did not need to start on the second trip until the middle of the afternoon. He would have long hours to work on his flower bed, improve his study, and learn about his chickens. Lovingly, he set his room in order and watered the flowers and carpet. He had chosen for his resting place the coolest spot on the west side, where there was almost always a breeze, but today the heat was so intense that it penetrated even there. I'm mighty glad there's nothing calling me inside, he said. There's no bit of air stirring, and it will just be steaming. Oh, but it's luck Duncan found the nest before it got so unbearing hot. I might have missed it altogether. Wouldn't it have been a shame to lose that sight? The cunning little devil. When he gets to toddling down that log to meet me, won't he be a circus? Wonder if he'll be as graceful a performer afoot as his father and mother. The heat became more insistent. Noon came, and Freckles ate his dinner and settled for an hour or two on a bench with a book.